their sketches, and the crowd would, you know, if I would be making my way up to the front of the table, and I'd get to the front and whoop, get right in the back and let more guys go in front of me. But Terry Austin watched me stand there for like 5 hours, just moving my way up and then going back, and finally he said, "Do you want to talk to John?" Yeah. And he goes, "You've been standing here all day. Is there something you'd like to show him?" And I said, "I got my sketch." And I just figured, oh my God, he's going to rip me a new one. He's like, there's no way I'm going to show him my artwork. And he said, "Well, show it to me." And so he sat there and looked at all my Dazzler drawings and, you know, Kitty Pryde and Wolverine drawings and stuff like that. And then he nudged John and he said, "John, this girl's been standing here all day long. Would you like to show you something?" And I'm sweating right now, but it's sweating 1,000 times worse. And John takes the sketchbook and he's looking through it, he's flipping through it. And the fans are all standing there. And
waiting for him to start saying something.
oh, I'm just like, oh no. And closes it and goes, "I think we should break her fingers." Because if she's this good now, she'll be really good later. But at first it scared the heck, you know, it scared the heck. I was like, I've offended him so badly, he must have freaked out. But that, I left feeling really great. I wrote Terry Austin a thank you letter, sent it to Marvel, and he sent me a letter back. And I carried that letter around with me in my school books until it fell apart. And
So did you get to know a lot of the professionals at the conventions, and that led you into showing stuff to a publisher?
yeah, because this would, you know, seeing how I didn't answer the last question that you asked me, I kept going to these conventions. It's like, you know, John Byrne was only there. He lived in Evanston at the time, so he would show up at this convention because I guess that's what he did. But there were other professionals. Bill Reinhold was there. Lennon Delsol was there. Bill Willingham was there because he worked for TSR, Dungeons and Dragons, and that's how I first knew him. I went, "You're the guy that draws the Dungeons and Dragons ad in my favorite comic." So, and just kept, and then I started, you know, I was a bit more confident to show people my art, and I started showing other artists my sketchbooks and my pages and things that I would do, and they would give me a critique and tell me what was right and what was wrong and why it was wrong. And Bill Reinhold was the best for that. I mean, he was a guy that could, and still can, tell you that you're doing every single thing on the page so wrong, but make you feel great. And I can't even stop. I have to go home right now and finish this because you're making me feel so great about drawing. And I would come back the next time and show them that I listened to what they said. And eventually they urged me to go to art school. In fact, the same art school that Bill Reinhold and Mitch McConnell and Lennon Delsol went to the American Academy of Art.
And how long did you go?
3 years.
To give a degree?
I have I have 2 types of degrees. I have a degree in watercolor and a degree in illustration.
Did you go as an illustration major, or you
Yeah.
just took whatever?
Well, I took the things that interested me. I took a lot of things. I took photography and advertising and stuff too, but I kept heavy on illustration and watercolor and life drawing.
Do you ever, during the art school thing, did you ever think, well, maybe I don't want to do comics, maybe I want to do this, or maybe...
Nope.
And
I figured I would do a lot of stuff, but I would be drawing comics.
And how soon out of school did you start working professionally? We're going to get to the professionals.
I was still in school. I started working professionally and got paid. I was working, well, I did some work for First Comics when I was in school. Because I took my school portfolio, and because First Comics was like 7 blocks away from my school, I had an interview with Alex Wald, who was the art director at the time. And my friend Rick Taylor was working as also as production manager at First Comics, but he used to work with Dennis and Ginny, who did the Just Imagine anthology. And so I knew him from there as well, and he said, you should come down here and show your portfolio. So I showed my portfolio to Alex. Alex gave me an 8-page backup story in London's Bar. And once I had that published, then I was kind of like, they knew, I just started working on and off, doing little things for them. I also ended up, I maintained a friendship with all the people that I met. Bill Willingham, Bill Anderson, who was inking Bill Willingham on the Elementals at the time. He was at Kamiko, so I would talk to them. And at one point, you know, showed Bill, you know, I did, I think, a sample page of what I would have done with a certain, you know, Elementals story that he had just come out. And then he showed it to Diana, showed it to Diana. Then I started drawing the Fathom miniseries.
So is that the first full-length comic thing you did, first miniseries?
Yeah. Well, gosh, it's kind of, I was working on a lot of things at that point. Like when I was around 18 or 19, I did some stuff for Now Comics. I also did a smattering of stuff for First Comics. When I got, and then I started working on Cornerman, who you worked on it.
Okay. And how long did you do it?
I did the Bull and the Spear, so 6 issues maybe?
Then,
Classic Illustrated, Scarlet Letter. Yeah, with Craig Russell did the layout for that, and then I painted that.
now when did you meet Craig Russell? Was that all kinds of connection with Craig Russell?
I lived in Kent, Ohio for 4 years,
Right.
so I would just go over to his house all the time.
And
Well, he was actually, his work was very influential on me, because I remember the first time I ever saw Kill Raven, I kind of went, well, I'm not doing this anymore, because I didn't realize he took photo reference. I thought that he drew everything out of his head. For a long time, for years, I thought that you had to know how to draw everything from memory. Like, we need you to draw a Cutlass Supreme car.
I thought when you went up to Marvel DC, they gave you a test. I thought they put you in a room and say, draw 60 guys on horseback.
Armor, it's like, how am I supposed to know? You know, I go to the museum and go, how am I supposed to remember all this? Know when it's from? You know, it's like reading old comics, you know, like House of Mystery or something where they had like a period piece. And I don't know how I remember this. But there was a guy in my art school, his name was Dave. He could draw every car out of his head. That was his savant talent. He could write down to like, you know, what's on the grill and how many, you know, bolts are on the. It was crazy. You know, he said, my father's got this kind of car. And he would draw. Oh, I remember that. He was it the edition that came out in the fall of that year? I don't know. I hope he worked for a car company now, because that seemed to be something great. But I thought, I have to be able to do that. How am I going to be able to do that?
So, how did you get to Sandman? Or it was Wonder Woman was first, right?
Yep.
Okay, was that your first?
I went to a lot of conventions, I guess, because I'm starting to think of like all of my, hey everybody, don't have any talent, just know a lot of people in this house.
But I mean, it's a huge part of it, getting in, as far as it's exactly the way I started. You just start working with people and showing people your stuff, because it's really hard to just walk in with a portfolio and then keep working the next day.
Right. I only interviewed once, and that was for that first comics job. And then the other ways that I interviewed, it's like you find out that somebody needed somebody on something. So you would call them or send, just cold, I would send samples. Sometimes, like with Wonder Woman, let's see, I don't even remember why or how. I was finishing up Classics Illustrated. Evan Dorkin and Robbie Bush were driving from New York to Detroit to do a convention. They stopped in Kent and stayed overnight at my house at the time. And then Robbie was coloring Sandman at the very first few issues, which is where we're coming out. Sam Keith was drawing them. He happened to mention they're looking for somebody to draw Wonder Woman. Jill, you should send Karen Berger some samples when you're, if you're done with this. You should send her some art. And I was like, I've never read Wonder Woman in my life. You should. I'm like, okay. And a friend of mine named Troy, who I used to do improv with. He had the entire collection of Wonder Woman, and I had borrowed it from him and read it, and sent some samples of Wonder Woman into Karen Berger. Robbie said, I'll tell her you're gonna send something. And then she called me back and wanted to pay me to do samples, which was the most amazing thing ever. Because it was like more money than I'd ever gotten for, you know, fully painting comics. And, you know, after I sent in the samples, she called me back and asked me if I wanted to draw Wonder Woman.
It sounds like you were never not working once you started.
I try not to
Was there
be.
any spell where you were just, it sounds like one job was overlapping another, overlapping another, overlapping another. Was there any period where you were like, maybe this isn't gonna work?
Maybe this isn't gonna work, no, I never thought that. But there was a period where I had a really big dry spell, and that was after the big comics bust in the 90s. Because after it busted, everyone had been jumping from story arc to story arc to story arc. And, you know, things were selling millions of copies, Image had just come out, all this kind of stuff, and then everyone went, I don't want to buy a variant cover, you're ripping me off. And anybody that had been working on a comic book title, seeing how a lot of places were going under, they said, I'll sign a contract for a year. So there was no like available opportunity to be leapfrogging around to stories. And for a long time I was doing, you know, some advertising and some spot illustration to try and keep me through, because there was just nothing working. And that was the time I had enough time to come up with Scary Godmother.
Cool.
But I probably would have never thought about it or done it. I mean, so many things happened at that right time to make me think of that idea. I mean, I don't think I could have, because for years people have said, well, why don't you come up with your own thing? It's like, I want to. I said, but I don't have any good ideas. And I didn't. I would have like, I could draw interesting things, but they had no, there was no meat on the bones in any way. And Scary Godmother happened because 1, I had no work. 2, I was going to be an auntie, and 3, I wanted to be a godmother. And I wanted to make a book for the baby. And I was just going to make a book, or like a, you know, bind it together, make illustrations, it would be a single book. And then finally, you know, one day I went, oh my God, this is the thing everyone's telling me I should have been doing. It's the thing that I've got a whole story for, with characters, and they all kind of came together really easily, and I could, oh wow, you know, I should try and find a publisher for this.
Well, because I remember when I saw that book, I'd never seen you do anything remotely like it. And I always liked the work, but this was the book where I went, holy crap, how long have you been able to do this? It
just came out
of nowhere.
It came out because of the circumstance. I wouldn't have even thought to draw like that, but that's how that character had to look, because that's the way she came out the first time she came out.
And I think people will think, and then everything changed completely. Because now you come up with your thing, there was no going back, and what happened? You did one Scary Godmother, and then did you
started to do another one right away.
Did you?
Rob Moran at Sirius was willing to keep doing them. I mean, the fact that he wanted to publish Scary Godmother in that format was something nobody else was willing to do. You know, everyone else that I had sent it out to, they're like, we like this, but we don't know what to do with it. We don't publish material like this. Like, I figured the first people I sent it to was Vertigo. You know, I was like, I've been working for you for 7 years now. Here's something, but like, we don't do material for children. I said, well, it's kind of not for children, it's for me, but kids can read it, because really there is no stuff for children. Or at least things that I remember, like I read when I was a kid, things that weren't pandering or condescending, just something that was kind of fun, that might have suspense, or, you know, like Jeff Smith's Bone is not a book for kids.
Right.
It's a book, it's an adventure story. It's accessible to kids, and I wanted there to be more material accessible to kids.
So did you think, I remember getting after you around this time, did you think you needed to keep doing what else you're doing in DC? You flop back and forth there.
I do still flop back and forth. I suppose I do think that I needed to do that, just pay a lot better.
So the stuff you've done hasn't paid as well as the other stuff, so still.
Monetarily, no. In my soul, yes.
Yeah.
Much more so. but I mean, pays better than, you know, I'd still be doing something that I really, really love.
Right.
It just,
So it's a balance. I mean, but you can pretty much pick and choose your non-creator-owned stuff too. I mean, it's not like you're taking a job, you're taking a Batman job you don't care about. You can kind of be very selective with your non-creator-owned stuff.
well, I still have a lot of ideas for things that are not creator-owned. I send proposals out and things that I would like to do. I have an idea, it would be fun for me to work on. And I would like to, you know, I would just like to be prolific.
And you're pretty fast, right?
Not anymore. Not as fast as I've been in the past and not as fast as I would like to be. But that's physical. Not cool, pain.
Oh, that's, I mean, sorry about that. We should open up to questions. Because now I know
I don't know if I ever really answered your question.
what do you want to talk about?
Somebody have a question?
Tell them about the stage play.
Here's what I want to talk about. It's part of that.
Everyone just keep prompting Mike.
Did Hollywood get involved
Really quickly.
really quickly? And how'd that go?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer.
I know.
Well, Hollywood got involved really quickly. Like by the time I had a second Security Godmother book out, I got it like kind of, I think it was about the time of the trilogy tour. I only had 2 books out. That trilogy tour was Jeff Smith, Linda Medley, Charles Vess, Stan Sakai, Mark Prilly, and myself were all traveling around as a kind of like fantasy-based material, and we'd go to conventions with a big tree that's constructed and have giant box made out of styrofoam and baskets full of your comics and kind of like this fairy marketplace. And at one point at San Diego Comic Convention, all these, like, I'm from Paramount, I'm from Disney, I'm from whatever, and we love your thing. And I'm like, and anytime anyone said, we love the scary grandmother, we want to make them I'm like, thank you very much. You know, it's like, you don't even know what I do. But I'd heard plenty of stuff from other people who had material option about how to be really wary about that, because technically they think you have a great name for something, and they'll tell you that they love it, and then they buy up everything, and you sell your soul to them, and then they change it into something that it's not. And I didn't want that to happen to me. I wanted it to be under the best circumstances possible. And the only reason it came out under the best circumstances possible were all by goofy accidents. The stage play that Mark was talking about was after I did decide to option Scary Godmother to Mainframe Entertainment, which is a Canadian-based 3D animation company. It was on the strength of the fact that, you know, well, they were doing 3D, and I wanted something that was not 2D, because I just felt weird, like someone would be drawing something. I didn't know. I wanted to see something that was completely different than what I did, because I did all the 2D work. So I thought I would love if it was stop motion, but nobody even thought about doing stop motion at that point, or were very aggressive about it. So I thought I could get the look of stop motion with 3D animation. And the director that was at Mainframe, his name's Zeke Norton, he really loved Scary Godmother. He was very into animation. He and I can talk Miyazaki movies all day long, because that's the kind of like feel I want for everything. But you know, it was in limbo for the longest time. Nothing ever happened with it. And then we created a stage play in Chicago of Scary Godmother, a 60-minute stage play for kids, and did 26 performances of it. And that play ended up being adapted to being the show that was on Cartoon Network. So it's like we had we had a videotape and a proven audience, and we knew that.
And a model.
A model of like what it could be. It's like it can be something that entertains on 2 levels, and it's kind of like really classic. It's not dated in any way, and we did it the way we wanted to. I mean, mainframe optioned Scary Godmother, and then there was no buyer for the product. So the clock was ticking for them, and they couldn't just sit back and do nothing once it had been optioned. So we got to make the 1 hour holiday special. It was kind of like me and Zeke making a cartoon for us with the budget we were given, and 8 animators. So, and I got to work, I did paintings that they used for backgrounds, and selected, tone and my watercolor wash to render the 3D models, and I, co-wrote the special, went to the voice record, did all sorts of cool things, went up to Vancouver a couple times. Worked every week, worked on the phone every single day with Zeke, and they would send me videotapes and take notes from me, and I would tell them, what I liked, what I didn't like, because Zeke said, technically you're the client, we have nobody else we have to please except you. He said, no one, you're never going to get this situation ever again in your life, which is very true. And so we got to make the best thing we could.
And were you happy?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I mean, I understand now, the complete difference between, I thought 3D animation, you click the mouse and they can change their clothes. I didn't know everything new each time, and that it's exorbitantly expensive. So I think if I ever got anything optioned again, I'd go try and find some old dinosaurs that wanted to do 2D animation, because I would like to see that, because now I know at least it's just a bunch of guys drawing everything, and I know that. I have to kind of learn how to, what I would say, Zeke was a great translator in between, because he was dealing with people who may or may not know how to draw. There are people that know how to work a program, but I would give notes that would be extremely art-based about the planes of a face, or the way that the shadow hits, or the length of a finger, or all sorts of things that are anatomical. And some of the guys would go, we don't know what she's talking about. And he would have to figure out how to tell them what to do based on the programs that they're using. And then he would have to tell me stuff that they needed from me, and they were speaking in binary code, and I was speaking in French.
What happens often is stuff into overseas, where there's a whole other gigantic disconnect.
Because you do know that.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that part.
And my experience is, it all made doing comics look really appealing.
Everything makes comics looking really appealing. You're God in comics. You can do whatever you want, and all you really have to do is fight with maybe one person, even if you have to do that.
Yeah. Another question? Oh, come on.
You probably talked about it a lot, but I'd like to hear, because I started reading Sandman when you were working on it, and I'd like to hear about what it's like to work on that. And I can throw 2 more prompts at you if that'll help.
Okay.
The other one is you did a death model, right?
Yes.
And now, after you get to look, I really want to hear what that was like.
I give a look?
Yeah, you kind of did.
You want to look?
And then the third thing is you mentioned improv a minute ago. I don't want to hear about that.
What do you want to know
weave
about
them all
improv?
together.
Story.
Well, improv is, I can weave improv into it. That's how when I first was coming up with ideas for Scary Godmother, I did improv. I went to the Second City Training Center and Players Workshop in Chicago while I was in art school, and then after I got out of art school. But which is really good if you're a nervous, shy person, because then you have your first class is to do things that are meant to embarrass everybody in the class, so everyone is on an even level. There's a guy that I know named Danny Schumann. We see each other, and the first thing we do when we get together is we stick our noses together, because we both have really huge noses. And that was we were supposed to stand next to each other, but we didn't know who we were going to be partnered up with. But the first thing you had to do was walk straight face to face and touch noses. And we looked at each other's faces, and we just started laughing the first thing. And we walked out, and we were like, "What? We don't even have to go close together." So I took that class and learned, you're paired up and you're on stage, and they say you have to go, give me a who, what, and where, and you make a story out of it. And that's kind of the way that I've created most of my stories for Scary Godmother. After the first one, because I have a base of my characters now that I know their personalities, so I know I could literally put the names in a hat, verbs in a hat, and nouns in a hat, and pull out bugaboo, fishing, and a truck and figure out, well, how would Bugaboo react if he was going fishing and he had to, you know, something. I could figure something out from that. I could make something up. So I found that to be really beneficial as far as there's almost no, and I performed on stage for a really long time, for 4 years in front of, we're doing wedding receptions and, corporate parties and Christmas/Hanukkah festivities. And you're with a bunch of people and, you have to stand up on a tiny place that someone has designated as a stage with your 2 other partners and a keyboardist and, make them laugh. So it's like you can kind of, it's become a helpful tool in creating things for fictional characters if you can do that. Working on Sandman, I don't know how there was no improv involved with Sandman for me. It was a really, really great experience. It was the best thing that ever happened in my career up until Scary Godmother. It was also the easiest working relationship with a writer I've ever had. Not because anybody else is really difficult, but because Neil tends to write stories to his artist's strengths. So he usually does one issue where he kind of feels out what you're good at, or he kind of asks you what you want to draw, and then by then he kind of figures out what's good for you, and the way that he structures things brings out the best in what you do. You'll notice there's not a lot of car chases in Sandman on my run, or
I don't think there were a lot of anybody.
no.
How long did you do Sandman?
Issue 40 through 49, so 9 issues, 10 issues.
And what was the other
Mignola, the death manga. That's not good. The death manga, I guess the reason I made a face is because that's what caused all my problems with my shoulder and arm. Like, well, no, I had one problem for one thing, another problem for another thing, but I got tendonitis really bad from the death manga because of her hair. Because of everyone's horribly feathered black manga hair. That in Japan there's a poor woman, her arm's in a sling, and she does nothing but like make all their feathery manga hairs. But doing the job of like what 5 people do in Japan when you're doing it all by yourself, for 192 pages, it's a lot of repetitive motion. But I really liked it, and I go back and read it, and I forget things that I put in there, and I'll, look, that's pretty good. Oh wait, I did that. But I do read my own comics on like the train or the bus. I'll pull them out after a while and read a Scary Godmother comic and go, I love this comic. I have to do more like this.
Another.
On the death manga, I'm just curious, what even inspired you to go and do such a drastic difference from what the style we had seen from you before?
I got asked to do it.
Really?
I guess for a while there had been a representative working for one of the bookstores, the major book chains, that had been coming to Vertigo all the time, as like a comic fan said, manga is taking up larger and larger space on the bookshelves here. It's only going to do so more. A lot of your material could be really well adapted into this format. Why don't you, like Sandman would be great shoujo manga. Why don't, you do that? Apparently, so then I guess Karen Berger turned around and was asking Neil all the time, they think this would be a really good thing. Can you, why don't we do it? Why don't we do it? And Neil's, I don't know enough about that material. I think it probably would work, but I don't know enough about it. I don't want to do it wrong. So, just didn't have time, don't want to deal with it, don't want to do it. The guy kept coming back and saying it, and finally, he would hear, Neil doesn't want to do it, Neil can't do it, and he recommended me. He said, well, why don't you let Jill Thompson do it? I didn't know about that. He mentioned it, like I ended up seeing him at a book expo at one point. He ended up mentioning it to me. I said, well, that's kind of cool. Then I guess Karen had asked Neil a few more times, and he said, well, why don't you just ask Jill to do it? And she said, do you think she could do that? And he goes, yeah, she'd be able to do that. And then Karen called me up and said, Jill, we'd like to do this type of thing, and this is what we need. do you think you can do it? And that was when I realized that I learned what I was supposed to learn from my art school about illustration. Because you're supposed to have a portfolio, or at least be able to alter your style enough that if somebody offers you a job to stipple a soup can or do a marker rendering of a car, you can say, yes, I can. So I said, sure, I can do that. And then I went around and started trying to draw manga, and boy, I hope I can do this, because I just agreed to do 192 pages of manga fairly authentically, as authentic as I could get. And I did a lot of research before I started it. I mean, I've always liked manga, and thankfully everything's being translated, or started to be translated when I started researching it, so at least I got to read a lot of material and know where I was kind of hitting the mark and not hitting the mark.
Was it intimidating writing Neil's character?
You
A lot
know?
of people would crack at that idea.
It wasn't. I guess on some level it really was, but I really love those characters, and I care about them a lot, and I enjoyed working on that series so much. I figured out, like, they offered me three things. You can either make up a completely new Sandman story, which I was like, no way, that would be way too difficult. I don't think I could do it. Or you can adapt one that we've got. And looking at, like, you can't adapt a whole graphic novel, because the way that manga is structured, it would be 7,000 pages long. And they wanted it to be, and they're like, well, why does it have to? Because, well, it does, because so much, like, things that he's got going on in 3 panels might take 13 pages to draw, because it's like emotion and looking back and forth at people, and it's like so intensely emotional versus verbal. There would be no way to translate this thing. But I said, there's one scene in Season of Mist. It's like, Season of Mist would be a great place to start, because it introduces all the family members at the beginning. You talk about what they're about. It's got a love story in it. It's got a quest in it. But then there's a scene, it's like, but I don't want to mess anything up. It's like, I couldn't mess up any continuity. But the scene in Dream's Gallery where Death pops out and yells at her brother because you better hurry up and figure out what to do with that key, because the dead are coming back, and you would not believe what is going on back here. And I was like, that's what I want to show. It's like, what does she have to do in the space of what is 2 issues of his comic? It's like, he's just sitting around one day and suddenly, boom, 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 what's, there's dead people all over the place. They're running them up. What do I have to do? And how do I make that fun? Or funny? But you start out, you end up in the exact same place you left off, so it doesn't mess up Sandman in any way. It's extremely reverent to the way the characters are. As far as I'm not altering the way they react to things or what they do, they still maintain, like, their personalities, and I don't change history at all.
Did you just do the one month?
I did too.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to.
I thought that, yeah, sorry, a lot of
Don't
people,
do it, do another scary godmother.
a lot of people got after me. But I thought, well, I was doing the first manga, if this was gonna be something they were really gonna push, while I was working on this, because it does take about a year to do all of that, that they would have other people working on more of the same, so they would have a bunch of them at the same time, but they waited till I finished one, and they said, well, now what's the next one you're gonna do? I said, yeah. I didn't think this is how you guys were gonna work that, you know, I thought it was gonna be.
We're gonna have a manga line. You were going to do it all.
I didn't think that was gonna be how it was, but that's kind of how it turned out. And
Another question? Yeah.
How hard is it to be an artist so soon after graduation and to work as an artist?
How hard is it? Well, I was working while I was in art school, but the first time you have to support yourself is really hard. I had to learn what was more of a priority to spend your money on, and that the shell game on the L is always rigged and you'll never win. And if you think that you're gonna win enough money so you don't have to, spend the cat litter money on some guy's walnut shell game, because you think now I can buy cat litter and food. You end up with, oh no, now it's really gonna stink in your apartment. It was kind of hard for a while. You just have to keep, like, I view all the, makes a lot of jobs overlap. They do, but you have to make sure that you have something coming up after the next one all the time. And they do kind of have to mess with you, because you go through periods of having way too much work all the time or no work at all. And,
Yeah, there's never a happy medium.
no, and it's like, so while I'm working on this, I have to find it, like, I've got proposals out now for other things, because I wanna have more work lined up. And so I know I've got 4 projects right now. I would like to have 4 more projects lined up after that, just to have some sense of security.
Yeah, but do you find it fairly easy to line up projects, or do you still have a lot of stuff that publishers are going, nah, we don't want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not, we like, we just don't know what to do
And
with
don't
that.
you, at this point, don't you feel like Jill Thompson, actually, it shouldn't be this, it
Deserve
shouldn't
some
be this
respect.
tough. You know who I am?
Well, the word, I don't know, I'm always trying to attract new readers that aren't interested in comics or the comic telling format into reading this material, because I love this form of telling stories. And I feel like I have a fair interest in retail outside the comic book genre. And it's like, there's stuff that I know that I would buy as a person that likes non-comics things as well. And I'm always trying to play to that audience. Like, I want the standalone cool thing that's comics format that one of my girlfriends that has kids that don't read comics at all would pick up and go, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then subvertively, you know, trick them into reading a comic. I feel like I did that with Scary Godmother because Terry LeVan's wife didn't like comics. Terry did comics. Oh, I just don't like it. It takes up time. I don't know which way to go. And these bubbles bother me. I don't know which way to go. And I was like, word ones. I say bubbles. Drive me crazy. If it just had real words on it. So Scary Godmother, I put anything that should have been in a caption box as text across, like in between panels and boxes. And she opened it up and looked at it and she goes, see, this is what I'm talking about. I know what to do with this. And she read that. She said, I really like this. And I went, now I've tricked a mom into reading comics. I've tricked her 4 times.
Now, you know, Scholastic had what looks like a really big success with, what about working for a book publisher? But trying to get comics publishers to do stuff that will work in the book market is sometimes difficult. What's the experience like working for a book publisher that wants to do graphic novel kind of stuff? Is it easier to cross that line there since you've done it? Right?
Well, in case nobody knows what Mike's talking about, he's talking about a book called Magic Trixie that came out last summer that one person knows about. That 3 people know about. That I wish you all knew about. It's published by HarperCollins. And I think, you know, HarperCollins and other companies are really doing a good job of trying to start publishing material that we're very familiar with the format of, but they're kind of not sure how to, well, I mean, Scholastic seems to be really good at it, and they've got a lot of people that are really working at it. I think HarperCollins, from what I've worked with them at, is just, it's like they have a book publishing format, and they're trying to smoosh comics into it.
Yeah, there's a middle ground there. So I was
It's
thought,
kind of in between.
when I saw Scary Godmother, I said, every children's bookstore should have Scary Godmother.
And they never do.
And there's this weird line you can't seem to cross. So is it possible to do a children's book that's a comic? Is it, I mean, say, if you can't get there this way, can you go the other side and come back this way?
I sent off the proposal for Magic Trixie as a picture book. And they came back to me and said, we don't want a picture book, we want you to do the thing that you do, this graphic novel. But we want it to be a digest, and we want it to be softcover. But so I wanted to do something that was more picture booky, and they came back at me with, we don't want that, we want the other thing.
Have you done children's books?
No. Yes, sorry. I illustrated Mick Foley's Halloween Hijinks and Tales from Ruskell Lane, also by Mick Foley. Those were picture books.
How did you get involved? I was going to ask, how did you get involved with those? How did
Stockton. At a comic convention. It's all about a comic convention. Now, you know, it's like, I like to come to comic conventions. My whole life is revolved around coming to comic conventions. I met him at a comic convention, San Diego Comic Convention, when Chaos Comics was putting out WWF at the time, comics, and was a huge wrestling fan, big Mankind, Cactus Jack fan, loved his book, and got to meet him, and knew he had some kids, didn't know, so I found out the next place he was doing a personal appearance and sent him a bunch of books for his kids and sent him a note that said, if you ever, I heard that you might want to draw a children's book. I know somebody that would draw out of that thing. And he called me and I like freaked out and cried. He thought Brian thought somebody broke into my studio. I called him real early in the morning, said a message on my answering machine from Mick Foley, and I was like, call me. What? Oh my God, are you okay? I was like, calm down, what are you saying? He said, Mick Foley left a message on my answering machine. You are a dork. And I don't know, started talking to him all the time and drew a bunch of Santa Clauses, painted a bunch of Santa Clauses for him because he likes Christmas and he wanted to do a Christmas book. And it eventually turned out to be the Christmas book he did that Jerry Lawler illustrated. But we stayed in contact all the time, and he sent me the idea for a story, and I just kind of, this is what I would do with this. And then he hired me to illustrate it for him with no publisher at all, and then he just started carrying around copies of it to try and convince people to publish it.
Did he write or did you write?
He wrote it. He wrote both of them. I mean, and they're all WWE based, so they, they feature wrestlers in them all the time. That's the only way that it could, that WWE would do it. He wanted, I mean, I know he really wanted the Christmas book to be just the really sweet Christmas story that he had in there, but it wouldn't go further unless it had, Kane and whatnot. Candy cane.
Anybody else?
But those are the only real children's books that I've done.
There
How'd you get involved in the Invisibles? Working with Grant and Light?
Grant's a really funny guy. I liked working with Grant. I learned a lot about a lot of things from working with Grant. I had just finished, I'd worked on Sandman for a long time. I'd worked on Black Orchid for 6 issues. And then we were on a Vertigo tour here in San Francisco, actually. I think we even stayed at the same hotel we're staying at. And Grant had a series that he was pitching to Karen, and Steve Yoel, who was also touring, was going to be drawing a certain section, certain arc, because everyone was doing story arcs because of Sandman and because of, you could jump from one project to another, like I'm doing 6 issues of this, and then I'm going to do Swamp Thing, and then I'm going to do that. Because it's kind of like musical chairs of comics. And Grant said, Steve's only drawn X amount of issues of this. Do you want to draw it next? Yes, I do, very much. So that's how that came about. I'll tell Karen, we have to work on it next.
Conventions and tours and things are very good for this. I mean, so much of this is networking.
But because you admire the work of the other people in the industry, it's like, I love, it's like, so of course if I have a chance to go, I love your work, I will, and I would like to work with you, and maybe they would like to work with me too. I really like to collaborate with people as well as do my own stuff. Not just anybody, I mean, because there are things that I just have I don't get any pictures in my head for it, and I would rather somebody that, really could draw it well right off the bat would do that instead. I mean, I have turned things down because
Do you guys ever work together?
once.
Is it?
We did a conference.
Oh yeah.
We were gonna.
Do you think that would be easy?
No.
Kind of hard to pitch about the artist missing the point of something if she's there, yeah.
Actually, no, I would love to work from a script because he's, I mean, I get to read all the scripts, and they're, I would love to work from one of his scripts. They're the easiest thing for an artist. Neil goes out of his way to make something that is formatted for you, what your strengths are, but Brian's always already like that. Everything I've ever read, I mean, it's so dialogue driven, and if you're the type of person, it's not like, I have a real problem with like over explanatory panel descriptions, and they're telling you, it's like, I could not work down more. I know I could not work down more. I really like that. I don't have the patience to go through it. I mean, from what I've seen of like the Watchmen scripts that were published, I don't know if he works like that all the time, but it's just like I would feel like I have handcuffs on. Like I don't get to bring anything to this story. I have to make sure that everything is like on a graph in exactly the place that he sees it in his head. I'm just a pair of hands here. I mean, that's only my own personal opinion about certain types of scripts, but Brian's art direction is so open to interpretation, and he's really respectful of what, he wants whatever the artist, I'm saying this right? He wants whatever the artist pictures from what he's written is the picture that you're supposed to get, because it's what is envisioned.
Do you have a laundry list of people you still want to work with?
I'd give it a
I'd love
shot.
to do that.
Well, no, there are a lot of people I still like to work with. I loved working, did anybody here read Finals by Will Pfeiffer? It was his first work for Vertigo that we did together. That was like one of the best collaborations. Will helped me move back to Chicago from Ohio. He was working and still works as a journalist in Rockford, Illinois. And we started commenting about some horrible, it was I think the Branch Davidian complex disaster thing. And we just started talking about the way the world was going and how extreme everything was and what people can get used to and the norm. And we just started thinking, and I used to live in Kent, Ohio, where he went to school, and we started talking about the difference between people who live there in the town of the school and the students that come to the school. And we just started like shooting ideas back and forth and came up with the idea of this really extreme college and what might happen there. And I love working with him, and I would love to work with him again. He can write a giant cast of characters really well, and we have a really similar sense of humor. So it would be really natural.
Do we have one last question?
I was just going to follow up on the finals. How come that's never been collected by Vertigo?
I got no answer for you there.
How about one more then? Okay.
I have a question. One thing is I always admire your watercolor work and everything that you draw in general. I was wondering, have you ever thought of making a how to draw Joel Thompson kind of book?
No, I'm a good example, but I'm a bad teacher. I don't know how to tell you how to draw like me, because sometimes I don't even know how to draw like me.
Something like for like kids, like a children's book version.
Oh, like how to draw?
Yeah, how to draw, or how to do watercolor.
It takes more than a few pages. It just takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
I do like to do, like, in the Scary Government things, like the treats
Yeah.
and stuff. I like to do explanations to just show people that it's fun to do this stuff. Like, there's a book I want to do for Magic Trixie, and it's called Magic Trixie Goes Outside. And just about, like, the things that she would do in an afternoon that nobody does anymore. I know it's kind of being nostalgic, but it's like, say your crystal ball, your spell-o-vision breaks, and you have to amuse yourself for an afternoon with no electronic gewgaws and gadgets, and you can't do anything. What do you do? And it's almost like her rediscovering what outside is.
Yeah. I think that's something that kids would love. Because,
But it would be kind of explanatory, like how do I build a teepee, and how do I make a mud pie?
Like draw how to do your own characters. So I know, like with my students who love drawing manga, they have like how to draw manga books. But it's just really simple. It's not really attached to any particular design. But it's just like an artist, that actually would catch on.
Well, I would be very Bill Reinhold about it. It's like you might want to draw this way, but you have to go to school and learn how to draw by the rules, and then you can break all the rules when you're done. But you have to know the foundation that's there first.
And we're out of time, so thank you.
And I'll sign things and draw pictures. And artist alley.
Tried it and didn't like it. How could it be because of this dreadful soup? Oh, it's just.
Did you like it too?
I'm not a big fan of it, but my family likes it. They're constantly like, oh, you know, they saw it on the calendar and like, oh, Mark will be happy.
Yeah. People just, people just have simple tastes. Carolyn has actually been to the soup plantation with me and witnessed me actually eating creamy tomato soup.
3 bowls.
That's right. And then what I do is I fill my I have my pockets lined with rubber so I can chop the soup and make some.
It's just full of coffee.
That's right. I wanted to put a diving board in. No humor whatsoever. All right, we're going to start this. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Evanier, and you picked a really good panel to come to. For the last couple years, I have been interviewing Gary in different cities, in different places, and we've had some wonderful conversations. We had a great panel, one of the best interviews I've ever done at the Kansas City convention last year, I'm going to attempt to replicate that same panel interview for you, see if I can get the same answers out of them. You'll be fascinating. This is a case, I know just about everybody in comics who was creating comics during my period in comics. And I didn't know Gary until fairly recently. I met him in passing in the Marvel offices in 1970 or like that, but we didn't really know him. Then I got to know this man, and I knew him first through his work, which I always thought was, cut above everybody else's. He was doing something very innovative. He took, like a lot of guys, he took over books that Stan Lee had done or Roy Thomas had done, and when he did an issue or two, he did a good job of replicating that style. And then when he took over a book on a long-range basis, like he did the Sergeant Fury, he had a way of making it his own and evolving it into an interesting, personalized franchise. And he did like 40 or 50 issues of Sergeant Fury, and I thought that was a really engrossing comic with very real people in it. Later on, he went on, he created some things for Marvel like Ghost Rider, and he did a lot of books that were completely his own. Would you join me in welcoming Mr. Gary Friedrich? Tell us about the movie theater.
Movie theater where Roy and I worked?
That's right. You and Roy Thomas worked at a movie theater back in...
I worked in the Palace Theater in Jackson, Missouri. Roy would have started there a couple years before I did. I started when I was like the 8th grade, I think, and Roy was maybe a junior in high school.
And you were how old?
And that would have been, I was, I don't know how old you were, 8th grade, 13, something like that.
Okay.
And Roy was like maybe a junior or senior in high school. This would have been 56, something like that. And Roy and I just hit it off, and we like the same kind of movies, we like the same kind of music. We were big Elvis Presley fans and rockabilly fans in general, and we had that in common. Later on, we would both be in a rock and roll band for a while, as a matter of fact. That's another story. But Roy came into the Palace Theater one day with the fistful of DC comic books. The DC superhero revival was just getting underway, and I remember he had a Flash and a Green Lantern and a Hawkman, all of which I liked, but I always liked Hawkman the best. And we'd sit around the theater between movies and there was nothing going on, and we'd read comic books and talk about them. This went on until the Marvel comics came out. I remember very clearly the day Roy brought in the first issue of Fantastic Four. Didn't realize what an auspicious occasion that was at the time. But we realized that we really were seeing something new and different here, and we really liked it because we wait for more Marvel comics to come out. And I kind of abandoned the DC stuff at that point because I liked the Marvel a lot better. And we continued to read Marvel comics at theater until Roy finally quit sometime when he was in college, and sometime I was a junior, senior in high school, something like that.
Were you involved with Alter Ego when you publishing that?
Yeah, when Roy began to do Alter Ego, I was kind of this gopher. I helped set out. The guy who owned the movie theater also owned a newspaper and a printing shop in town. And when I was a senior, I worked as a reporter and did whatever else I needed done around the newspaper. And I got right hooked up with them to print the first few issues of Alter Ego and helped out with it hard work. And I helped find the second Joy Holiday. The first one was Joy's girlfriend, and they broke up or something. He didn't know the Joy Holiday, so I got a girl who worked at my newspaper to post Joy Holiday.
Joy Holiday was a mascot. It was like the Feminine in Playboy or Mr. Esquire. It was a cute girl in a generic superhero suit and had photos of her on different pages.
That's right.
That's right. Now, you were in touch with Roy up until the time he moved to New York to start writing comics?
Yeah, Roy graduated from college, and I finished high school. While he was going to college, I worked at a music store in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, near our hometown of Jackson, about 100 miles south of St. Louis. And yeah, we were in touch and buddies all the time. Roy graduated from college and taught at a couple of cities in Missouri, including the town of Arnold, where I now live, which is a suburb of St. Louis, about 20 miles south. Funny how things work out. But we stayed in touch even after we moved and began to work as a teacher. And of course, we continued to talk about comics and see movies and listen to rock and roll stuff. We started a little band and played music on the weekends, had a lot of fun doing that. Then Roy finally got the chance to go to New York, and we stayed in touch after New York, just not as much as long distance was a lot more expensive than it is now with the telephone. But we talked from time to time. And after Roy had been there a few months, I was working in a factory in Cape Girardeau, assembling the toaster mechanism for waffle irons. You had to put little pegs and holes and then wrap the iron wire around them. And it was a little bit on the boring side. They had a union. The union couldn't get us any more money. But what the union could do was they could limit the amount of toasters that we could make on a shift. So you had to make something like 35 toasters on a shift, and you could put together 30 of them in an hour very easily. So, and yet you were supposed to stay busy during this entire period. So I got bored real fast sitting there trying to put this thing together, you know, and do 35 toaster irons and make it look like that I was working for 8 solid hours. I finally called Roy and said, "They're driving me crazy down here. I got to do something." And he said, "Why don't you come to New York?" Sounded good to me.
Did you ever been to New York?
No.
You ever been to a city that big?
No. St. Louis is the biggest city I've ever been to. I've never been out of Missouri, except maybe to Illinois.
So you took a train to New York, or?
I took a bus.
Bus?
Which is not the best way to travel, but it will get you there. I'd never flown at that stage in my life. I just hopped on the bus and rode to New York and got out down to Times Square, which is, I guess, a good way to start New York City. And that was the old midnight cowboy Times Square, not the glitzy Times Square that it is today. But Roy met me at the bus station, and we went down. We were staying with a guy named Dave Keeler, who started the first Comic Con in New York in 64, 65. And we stayed with Dave briefly, and then got an apartment of our own down on Bleecker Street in the Village.
And Roy was working as an assistant editor at Marvel at the time.
That's right.
And what was your first job?
My first job in New York was panhandling. I ran out of money in a hurry and started, I asked people if they had any change, and sometimes they'd give it to you. But it was in November, and it was quite cold, and I decided I'd better find something honest, so I got out of the newspaper and got a job at a record store over in Queens and worked over there for a few months.
And when was your first job in the comic industry?
First thing I did in the comics industry was Roy lined me with Dick Giordano, who was the editor of Charlton at that time. And I went to Derby and talked with Dick, and Dick gave me a couple of romance comics assignments. And so the first stuff I wrote was primarily romance stuff for Charlton, and Dick liked that, so he put me on Blue Beetle with Steve Ditko. And I went up there and had a meeting with Steve Ditko, whom I idolized the Spider-Man artist, but never gotten to meet when he was at Marvel. So I sat down, Dick and Steve talked, and I listened. I don't think I said 3 words from the whole deal, but Dick and Steve and I did, I don't know, 3 or 4 issues of Blue Beetle together up there, and I did a fan artist named Sam Granger, and I did a little superhero group, which Roy helped us out with, and Don't Ever Tell Stan. And it's called the Sentinels, and we did a few issues of that. And while I was doing this, a little assistant's job opened up a Top chewing gum. Lynn Brown was a friend of Roy's, and Lynn and I had become friends. Lynn later became the editor of the Top's comics line. And Lynn got me a job doing whatever needed to be done around the office for he and Woody Gelman at Topps. The one thing of note that I did there was I wrote a series of Superman bubblegum cards, Superman in the Jungle. It was not a real big hit. What happened was that the Tarzan TV series with Ron Eli was coming out that fall. Topps did not have the rights to Tarzan, but they wanted to cash in on what they thought was going to be a big deal. So somebody over there got the brilliant idea that we do Superman in the Jungle. I remember trying to explain to Woody Gilman how Superman fighting a lion was not going to be real exciting. The lion was going to have a real good chance in that battle. But they wouldn't listen, so the series was done. There's, I don't know, 50 some odd cards that I wrote for them. And I haven't seen a whole lot of them out there. I don't know what happened to all the ones that maybe they all got destroyed. I don't think they sold very many. But I worked at Tops for a few months, and then the job opened at Marvel, and Roy got me up there and hooked me up to Stan. I did go work at Marvel in fall of '66.
No, you were an editorial assistant.
That's right.
And what did you do your first day there? What was the first thing they gave you to do?
That's a good question. I was nervous and excited. I'd been up there and I'd met Stan and Flo and some of the other people before I actually went to work there. And it was a very comfortable place to work, and I relaxed pretty soon. And
what did you do? What was your job? Tell me what kind of a job.
my job, number one, Martin Goodman insisted that we write X number of pages a week on staff, which we didn't get paid the extra money by. It wasn't a lot of pages, maybe 6 or 10 pages or something.
Martin Goodman was the publisher.
But that's one of the things that I did, was I had to write a script on staff, and I did a lot of proofreading.
What script did they have you do? What was the first script you did?
The first stuff I did was Millie the Model. That's the way it went. You started out with Millie the Model. And there were 2 Millie the Model comics. There was Millie the Model and Modeling with Millie. There might have been another one called Millie's Friend Chili, as a matter of fact.
There was also Mad About Millie. It was
If there were, I might have written some of those too. Eventually, if you did well on Millie, you get to move up to the Westerns. Stan's brother Larry was handling the Westerns, but Larry would get behind on the schedule sometimes. When Larry would get behind, they'd ask me to catch him up, so I began to do some Kid Colt and Rawhide Kid and Two Gun Kid, I think that's what we did at the time.
Now, what else did you do as an editorial assistant? What else did you do besides writing scripts?
Proofread.
Okay, what else? Did you rewrite sections?
Read some mail to help Flo out. The mail was Flo's job, but she passed it on if she got a chance. It was also up to Flo and I to greet any fans who came into the office. So several times a day we'd go out in the office and talk to fans. 2 of the fans that I talked to early on that I remember were Mark Wolfman and Lynn Williams.
Whatever happened to them?
Gee, I don't know.
Were you rewriting scripts? Did they give you a comic and say, here, rewrite this page and fix this?
No, I never had any problems with that. My recollection is that Stan never went over one of my...
No, but I mean other people's scripts.
Well, there wasn't anybody. It was just Roy and Stan. They were going to have you read their scripts.
Were you...
No, I didn't do that.
Okay. Were you ever writing responses in the letter pages, replying to letters?
I don't recall doing that until I started writing the books. Whenever I started writing Sergeant Fury, then they turned that letters page over to me. I might have done some Millie letters pages.
Okay. At what point did they hand you, was the Sergeant Fury the first adventure type?
Sergeant Fury was the first real book, yeah. I believe it was issue number 43.
Now, did you have any particular desire for Sergeant Fury, or that was just what was available?
Stan, of course, wasn't crazy about writing Fury and dumped it on Roy the first chance he got. Roy wasn't crazy about writing Sergeant Fury and dumped it on me the first chance he got. I was always kind of a World War II buff. Not that I know a lot about it, but I enjoyed history in high school, and particularly the World War II period. And I kind of looked forward to writing Fury. I thought that I'd get a kick out of it, and as it turned out I did. I stayed on and wrote it like forever.
Okay. And you were working with a man named Dick Ayers.
That's right.
Who was a very good person to work with.
Dick was a great guy to work with. I don't remember us ever having a crossword. We got along great. He'd aggravate me sometimes with some of the stuff he did with his panels, but as we talked about yesterday, Dick had a propensity to cheat a little bit from time to time. You get a panel that just had a hand and the finger pointing head sticking out and stuff like that. But Dick was a good storyteller. I told Dick we had a little discussion on the phone, and pretty soon the pages would start coming in for the work on it. Dick always had a good job with the storytelling. We never had a problem with that.
And then one day they said to you, John Severin's going to draw Sergeant Fury.
Yeah, I didn't know who John Severin was. Roy had to tell me. And so I wasn't excited. I was ambivalent about the whole thing. I was glad we were going to get Vinnie Coletta off of it. Because I didn't like Vinnie's inking on Dick's artwork was not a great combination. But they said Severin's one of the all-time greats. You're going to love this guy. And of course it turned out it did. But it didn't start out that way. It started out, they gave the whole book to John to pencil and ink. And of course, the way we worked tomorrow, then you give the artist a plot, and the artist would draw off of the plot, and then bring the writer of the artwork, and then we'd write the script off of the artwork. And John brought in this chicken scratching, I couldn't tell what the hell it was. I mean, there was nothing there. Stick figures I got. And even then, not clear enough to tell what was going on. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And John just walked in, introduced himself, and how you doing? I hope this will work out. I'll finish it up with a brush. And there I said, and I'm supposed to write this, and there's nothing there for stick figures. I went to Roy and said, oh, Roy had to admit that it'd be a little bit difficult to write off of that artwork, so we took it in the stand and saying, well, you know, John Seven, we just got him, we don't want to run him off, I don't know what the hell we're going to do here. It's my recollection that he finally called John, asked John if he could tighten it up at least just a little bit, and that John did, and then we were able to go on from there. But after an issue or two, we decided it wasn't going to work out. They decided to bring Dick back on doing the pencils and just have John ink them, and that worked out real well.
Now, Mr. Severin was, and still is, politically very right-wing. And you were writing Sergeant Fury during the Vietnam War, and you were the subtext. You were turning a war comic into an anti-war comic. The subtext of the book was Vietnam, protesters, pacifists. Did you get any reaction to John to what he was thinking?
Actually, everybody thinks that about John, and John and I never really butted heads politically. What John would attack me on would be lapses of fact for World War II history was concerned. I remember he got really upset about a story I did called The Deserter, which at the end of the story is American soldier is put before a firing squad and executed. And John was just livid about it. I always suspected that this was really his way of getting to me politically. And he was afraid to say anything about the politics because he wasn't quite sure just where Stan's politics stood. And so he attacked me on the basis of this. He said, I remember him saying, God damn it, no American soldier was executed during World War II, not since Eddie Slovak in World War I, and we can't do this. John, you know, talk to Stan, whatever he said. And Stan apparently backed me up on it because I never heard another word about it. The story went through, it was approved, and there weren't any problems about it. So John would nitpick at me about history and historical facts from time to time, but politics, we never really locked arms over that.
How did the readers, did the readers ever object? Did you ever get angry mail about the politics?
I don't remember. I got a letter from a neo-Nazi one time who threatened to assassinate me, and they called in the FBI and they talked some people around the office and took the letter with them, and that was the last we ever heard of them. But never a lot of strong political stuff. Most of the letters were very pro. I suspect the people who were in favor of the war probably weren't reading Sergeant Fury.
Let's talk about some other things besides Sergeant Fury you did for Marvel. For a while they had you on X-Men. Roy passed X-Men on to you. Is this a book you wanted to do, or they just stuck you with it?
No, again, it was just passing it on down. When Roy got through with something, he'd pass it on down to me. So when he got through with X-Men, that was passed on down to me. And I wasn't crazy about the X-Men, and I couldn't really tell you why. There was something about it that just wasn't. They weren't a Marvel superhero group in the sense of the Fantastic Four. You didn't have as much as I thought of the Stan Lee touch. You didn't have as much characterization at that point in those characters, and I just wasn't very interested in the characters. I just couldn't get into it. And I only wrote, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 issues of it.
And you wrote the Hulk for a while?
I was the first person to write the Hulk after Stan got. Stan called me in one day and said, I just don't have time to write anymore. I've got to give up some stuff, so you're going to write the Hulk. I said, okay.
Now, you were working with Marie on this.
I worked with Marie and then
Another Severin, Marie Severin.
I don't remember if I worked with her on the Hulk at all or not.
You did a little bit. You started with Marie.
We started out with Marie. And
now, did Marie, during the time you were working for Marvel, did Marie Severin ever draw an unflattering caricature of you?
Almost daily. She did it earlier. I can tell you about my favorite. I went out to Jones Beach, and I like to drink, and we'll probably talk about that before this is over. At that time, I like to drink a bit. And I went out to the beach and got loaded one day. It was a cloudy day, and I was thinking I was safe from sunburn. And I passed out on the beach, and I got sunburned so badly that my ankles swelled up about like this. I rode the subway in New York and without shoes on from Brooklyn into New York without shoes on, and would walk barefoot from the subway to the office because I couldn't stand to have any shoes or socks on my ankles. And I went in and told everybody about my experience and got what sympathy I could. And Marie was particularly sympathetic because at the end of the day, there was this cartoon on the wall. Now, in the office, I told you I like to drink a bit, and I had a frosted mug that you couldn't see through, and I would sometimes pour beer into that mug and drink a beer while I worked in the afternoon. And everybody apparently knew this except Stan, or Stan knew it, he didn't say anything about it, and I can't imagine he wouldn't have said something had he known. But I would drink beer, so I get this cartoon of me in my hippie dress splendor, and I'm walking down the hall with this mug of beer with foam pouring out of it, and my ankles are all swollen up and red and pain lines coming out of it, and little sounds from my feet saying shuffle, 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 and a balloon said, "God damn it, Stan, I'm a-coming." And she did stuff like it to everybody all the time. It was hysterical.
Marie was the world-class champ of unflattering caricatures. You know, if something happened in the office, she'd have a drawing up.
Absolutely.
In 10 seconds about it. It was amazing.
Her Henry was the guy that she really attacked the most. She loved to draw. Her had kind of dark eye. It looked like he'd been drinking because he had his eyes, the skin under his eyes was somewhat dark. And she just made this Indian. I think her had some Indian blood. She'd make this second-faced, dark-eyed Indian drawing out of it. It was just so funny, and almost every day Herb got it.
Now, the office was a fun place to work.
Absolutely.
They didn't pay you well?
Well, compared to what I was making in Missouri, I didn't pay enough to pay.
Okay. And at some point you went off staff and were just freelance.
Yeah.
Tell us how you made that decision. You were getting enough freelance work?
Well, it wasn't the smartest decision I ever made. I always wanted to come to California. And a friend of mine in the spring of 1968 called me up and said, "I'm taking off from college for the summer. I'm going to go to California and hang out there. Do you want to come along?" And I had a few drinks and thought about it and said, "Sure." Then I had to go in and tell Saul and Stan about it. They took it fairly well, although Stan admonished me, as he did other people who went off staff at that time, that, you know, you're free to work on staff or you're free to go on freelance, but if you go on freelance, you got to understand there are no guarantees where the work's concerned. Especially not if you don't live in New York. Now that's changed today, but in those days, and I found out quickly that it was an out of sign, out of mind deal. I wasn't in California long until I started getting pretty angry. So I didn't stay in California very long.
And you went back to New York?
Went back to New York.
But you didn't go back on staff?
Didn't go back on staff, not for some time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, no, I'm just, you worked for Marvel through about what year?
I worked freelance for Marvel and had another brief bit on staff, but up until '78.
Okay. And but your work for them started declining at some point. They were giving you a little less to do.
I missed one of
Your work started declining. They were giving you less to do at some point.
Yeah.
Tell us about what happened there.
I'm trying to recall. Whenever I went to California in '68, they needed somebody to take my place. And I had met Steve Englehart, and Steve and I became pretty good buddies. And Steve was trying to break into the business as a writer. And I suggested to Stan and Roy that they might consider hiring Steve to take my place, and finally they did. And the next thing I knew, I'm in California and Steve's writing all my books. Which is not Steve's fault. Stan warned me. He told me that's what was going to happen. So from then on, it became a matter of politicking and doing whatever you had to do in order to get enough work to live on. And I did some other projects. I worked some paperback musical anthologies with Lynn Brown over at Thompson. Wrote some record reviews for Country Music Magazine. Whatever I could pick up, I'd do. I wrote a couple of straight paperbacks about country music singers. Lynn Brown and I were big country music fans, so I did a couple of those. Saul Browski left Marvel and started his own company, and I did some work for Skywall for the brief time they were in business. Did a character called Hell Rider, which was sort of a precursor to Ghost Rider. And
were you a motorcycle rider?
No, everybody asks me that. And the funny thing is, in spite of the work of the motorcycle code, I rode a motorcycle one time. Got on it, cranked it up, the motorcycle went right up in the air and came right down on top of me, and never got on one again. I like the movies about the motorcycle guys, and when I worked for the men's magazines, I like writing what we call cycle bastard stories, but I didn't want to ride one.
What's a cycle bastard story?
The cycle bastard stories were stories about Hell's Angels cycle gangs who came into town and do what they'd been doing ever since the movie The Wild One. And just about every issue, every month, would have a cycle bastard story in it. There would be an action-adventure story, and this story, and that story. All made up.
Okay, now let's get to the part of the story that I just always fascinated talking about drinking. Speaking of drinking, that was about the size of what you were drinking back then.
I needed it. If these had been around when I was drinking, I wouldn't have lived through it.
When did that start affecting your career?
Probably from the word go, but when it really began to be a problem was maybe after I'd been there for a year or so, and I met a couple of people who introduced me to this little place around the corner from the Marble office called the Carl Bar. I don't know if it was still there when you were in New York or not, but it was kind of a magazine management hangout. And
Magazine management was the parent company of Marble at the time.
I ducked in there for a drink one afternoon after work and met a couple of the men's magazine editors, and we became friends, and pretty soon we were having lunch there, and not too much longer we were having breakfast there, and then it became coffee breaks there. When I went to work for the men's magazines, my editor and I began having editorial conferences in Carl Bar, and our lunches would last 2 or 3 or 4 hours sometimes. And we were indignant, to show you how alcoholics are, when Chip Goodman, Martin Goodman's son, called us in one day and said, "You guys are staying gone for lunch 3 or 4 hours. This has got to stop." And we said, "What do you mean? Our magazine's selling well. We do our best work down there. You can't take us out. We do much better work down there than we do up here." And I remember Chip was just kind of, and he never, he just kind of laughed. Well, try to not take such long lunch hours, guys. Well, okay, we said.
Shortly after this, they fired Chip and kept these guys over.
And there it is. But drinking becomes an overwhelming and all-consuming passion, and it becomes what's important. When I went to work in the morning, what was important was not getting to work and getting my job done. What was important was stopping at the Carl Bar, having a couple of eye-openers, and then the next important thing became getting through a couple hours so I could run back down on a coffee break and have a couple more drinks. Then the important thing was not getting back to work. It was how the hell am I going to get by until noon, and so on and so on. The all-consuming passion is to get to the next drink, and when you're in a position where your working interferes with your drinking.
Yeah.
And certainly that played a part in my deciding to become a freelancer, because I was a freelancer and work wasn't going to get in the way of my drinking anymore. And of course it didn't, and I like that part of being a freelancer. I bought into the idea very young that the creative juices are fueled by alcohol. And I bought it and believed it, went for a hook, line, and sinker, and for a long time after I got sober, I didn't write anything because I just didn't really believe I could do it without the juice. I eventually found out I was wrong, of course, but I didn't know that. I didn't know it at all. And of course you drink more, you drink more and more until you get to the point where you can't. And then you begin to take less and less to get you where you want to be, and then it takes less and less to get you beyond where you want to be. My idea as a drinker was always get up in the morning, drink enough to get over the night before, and just kind of level out and hit the spot where something clicks in your head and everything's just okay. Everything's just okay now. I'm just going to drink enough the rest of the day and night to maintain that buzz. And I could do that for a while. And it was a swell way to live. But the trouble with alcohol is it turns on you and becomes your enemy. It doesn't work for you anymore. And you get to a point where you can't get that click anymore. And when you get to that point, you're in big trouble with alcohol. And of course, I reached that point. I was fortunate enough to survive it. Many don't. I walked around Mission Street down here last night. And it really hurts me to see those guys passed out lying on the street. You know, Jesus, I'd give anything to help them. But for the grace of God, that's where I'd be. they're 6 feet under, and it's really tough. I'm one of the lucky ones, and I realize that, and I'm grateful for it. But I can assure wound up just like them, that's what happens.
Was there a moment when you lost work, that you could say, because of the drinking, I lost this job because was there a connection, a direct connection between getting work and drinking in your mind, or were they separate?
If there was, I'm not really aware of it, not where Marvel was concerned. After I got out of the comics business for the last year or so, I became pretty much unemployable. But as long as certain people, John Purporton in particular, was in place at Marvel, the chances were pretty strong that I was going to be able to get work. Number one, because John and I were really tight and close friends, and John tried to look out for me and help me when he could. And number two, I had the ability to get work done and get it done fast, and no matter how loaded it was, it seems to have come out all right. I never was called in by Stan or Roy and told, this is garbage, what the hell's the matter with you? You can't write this stuff, you can't pass it up. Never heard any complaints. If there were any, they never reached my ears, and I could always get more work, and John would always give me work. So, how much, had John not died, how much farther that would have gone on, I don't know. I certainly reached the point about 6 or 7 months after John Purporton died in 1977, where I sat in the typewriter and I just couldn't do it anymore. The booze had always helped me to work before, but at that point, the fingers just wouldn't work. And the only thing that I was doing at that point was Captain Britain for Larry Lieber, and I had to call Larry and say, Larry, I'm sorry, I just can't do it anymore. At the same time, I lost, and we haven't talked about it, I lost a king-size special edition of What If, which Herb Trimpe knows. What if Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos had fought in outer space? It seemed like a fun idea, and I did the plot and Herb drew it. Then John Purporton died, and
John Purporton was the production manager at Marvel at this period.
I went back to Missouri and kind of forgot about these pages that were scheduled for me to write. And I began to get calls from New York saying, where the hell is this job? When are you going to start writing this? And oh my God, where is the artwork? And to this day, I don't know where that artwork went. They had stats of it in New York, so they were able to have somebody ink off of the stats and go ahead and get the story done, so Herb didn't have to redraw it. But probably, had I not already quit writing the stuff for Larry, they would have probably fired me for it.
Tell us about stopping drinking.
You reach a point where something happens. In my case, very briefly, I'd been drinking the entire year of 1978. I had a friend who was a truck driver, and he is the last person in the world who would buy me a drink. And he just said, well, you come on and ride around the truck with me for a while, I'll teach you how to drive a truck. That would have been tricky. And this guy, I would ride around all over the country in his truck. He and I were in San Francisco the day that Harvey Milk and Mira Moscone were assassinated. That was when I was on my last debauch. And I spent about 6 or 8 months riding around the country in a truck just drinking 2 quarts of vodka a day. Shaking like I got down to about 110 pounds. I looked like one of those things you put on the dash. I was just like this all the time. And I went home for Christmas that year, and my friend told me, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep supporting you and buying the booze and watching you kill yourself. My family all told me, you're welcome to stay with us if you don't drink, but if you drink, you can't stay here. And I went home for Christmas. I had a little daughter who has cerebral palsy. She was like 3 or 4 years old. She wasn't walking yet. I hadn't seen her in about 6 months. I went over to my parents' house, and she wasn't walking yet. She got up on her knees and came over toward me and threw her hands around my neck and hugged me and said, I love you, Daddy. And it clicked in my head. I knew it. For the first time in my life, I knew what I really was, a worthless, hopeless, useless drunk. And I knew I was going to die if I didn't do something about it. Now, I had been exposed to AA for many years before this. My mother was an alcoholic and had been in AA for many years. And Bill Everett, I drank with and then saw get sober. And Bill spent a lot of the last 2 years of his life trying to get me in AA. And so when the time came, I knew where to go and what to do about it. And I told myself after this thing with my daughter on New Year's Eve, typical alcoholic, when nobody can get sober during the holidays. So I'll go ahead and party with my friends and get this thing out of my system this last week, and then New Year's morning I get up and I won't drink anymore. Well, I got up New Year's morning and I drank before I even thought that I'd made the promise to myself, and then I, you know, what the hell am I going to do? This has got to go on. I had considered myself an atheist for many, many years. Well, true, I wasn't really, but I told myself I was because that seems intellectually hip and cool thing to do. And that New Year's night, my brother told me I had to pack up and get out the next day. And I went down to his basement, and I did a funny thing for an atheist. I got down on my knees and I said, God, I don't believe in you, but if you're there, help me to quit drinking. And I got up the next morning. I had no hangover. I had no shakes. I had no desire to drink. The desire to drink has not returned since that day. And folks, I ain't an atheist anymore. That's the end of the sermon, but that's my experience. That's what happened. I haven't had a drink since that day.
So how long has that been now?
30 years.
Now you're writing again.
Pardon?
You're writing again.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing. I kind of backed away from comics because I thought I couldn't write, and I fell into other jobs. I managed a movie theater like I'd done in high school for a couple of years, and then I became a pioneer in the movie rental business in St. Louis and did that for a number of years. And then I just kind of fell into a family thing, which had been driving courier routes, and I've been driving the courier in St. Louis for about 16 years, and I'm sick of it. I'm tired of driving 12 hours every night, 4 nights a week, driving about 300 miles, and I'm sick of it, and I'd like to get back to writing comics and hope I'll get the chance to. We'll see.
Fascinating. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask this man? I've been asking all the questions. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry I came in late if I missed some of this. You, if I'm not mistaken, you replaced Stan Lee writing Captain America for a while?
You were Captain America for a little while.
I'm thinking just a couple of 3 issues of John Romita, but I did, yes.
Was there
There's
any...
a story with the Falcon in it.
Was there any directions? I mean, it seems like Stan Lee had a pretty tight hold on that character for so long. For a change of writers to take place had to be a big thing.
Stan had been doing the book for a long time. Gary's a little hard of hearing, so Stan had been doing the book for a long time. Now you're taking over. Were you given any direction? Did they tell you what kind of stories to do? Did you?
No. The freedom that I got from Stan was amazing. I was never told a lot of it. Roy and I pretty much knew what Stan wanted. And as long as we weren't thinking of stepping outside those bounds, we were pretty much free to do what we wanted to do. If we wanted to do something wild and crazy, then we might go in and ask Stan about it. If we do something that's going to change anything drastically. But other than that, my recollection is pretty much doing what I wanted to do.
Yes, sir.
So were you reading the different books, or when Stan would say you're writing Hulk, or would you go and get the last couple issues and read them, or how would that work? How would you kind of get into it?
I was reading all the comic books every month all the time, so I was always on top of what was going on. There's always about a 3-month lag, and I might have to go to the person who's been writing the article and say, well, what's happened in this last 3 issues, so I'm up to stuff on it. But other than that, it wasn't a problem, because we read the books. And bringing a big stack of comics to us every month, and take them home and do your homework. But it was fun homework.
Who did you admire as a writer in comics? What other writers did you
As a writer,
Oh, yeah.
Stan.
Okay, who else?
That's it. Stan, and then as Roy became a writer, of course, I liked his writing. I liked a lot of stuff that Roy wrote back in school, but I knew that Roy was a good writer. But in comics, those were the guys whose writing that I liked.
There was no one at DC whose writing you liked?
No. But, you know, all of a sudden I read that first issue of Fantastic Four, and I just found the DC stuff really, really boring, and I didn't read it anymore.
Another question? Yes, sir.
When you were doing Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., something that seems like it's just been forgotten is that you actually killed him off in the last issue. He's like shot dead. First of all, personal comment is that was like my first or second favorite comic, and I thought, geez, these Marvel guys are mean. I mean, I just canceled it today. But then it's like they didn't rewrite it, they didn't retcon it. It's just like they ignored it. Did that piss you off? It's like it didn't happen.
Here's the way that worked. We're going to do the last issue of Shield. The book was canceled. So I said to Roy, the way things work, usually if I had an idea, I'd talk to Roy about it, and then Roy would give me an idea whether he thought it was a good idea to go and talk to Stan. Said, what we need is the last issue of the Shield comic, let's kill Fury. And none of this comic book type stuff where you come off real, I mean kill him dead. No more Nick Fury, let's do it. Because I had written Fury, I got really close to it, I didn't want anybody else coming back and writing him later. I thought, I might as well be the guy to kill him off. So Roy said that was fine, and then he went into Stan, and Stan said, yeah, that's okay, we're done with Fury, we've got enough mileage on him, kill him off. so I killed him off. Sometime later, during a plotting conference, Stan and Roy and an artist were talking about doing something, and Stan said, I know, let's bring in Nick Fury. And Roy said, no, Stan, you can't do that. Stan said, what do you mean? And Roy said, Stan, don't you remember back 2 years ago when Gary and I came to you and said for the last issue of S.H.I.E.L.D., we're going to kill Nick Fury, and we killed him. We had him assassinated. And Stan said, I don't remember that. And Roy said, well, I can show you the issue. And Stan said, no, you don't have to do that. And Roy said, well what are we going to do then? And Stan said, I'm thinking something, bring him back. And that's the way it was, and probably still is in the comics. You never did. I'm telling you, Captain America is not dead.
Another question. Yes, sir.
What do you think about Nick Fury being played by Samuel L. Jackson?
What
do you think about Nick Fury being played by Samuel L. Jackson in movies?
You know, that's a loaded question. It's hard to say without sounding like a racist. But the fact of it is, I did write all 50 issues of the War book and the number of issues of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I never noticed he was black. I never noticed that. I got to ask Stan about that. Maybe Stan pulled a secret on me that I didn't know about. But I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, you know, he's been white all these years. All of a sudden you're going to change him. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's typical of the way Hollywood sticks their nose up at the comic book industry. They don't pay any attention to it. They don't think we have any talent. They'll take our characters and make millions off of them, screwing them up mostly. But they don't have any respect.
Joe?
Did you ever have a situation where you turned in a script and then when you saw the comic, it wasn't the way you envisioned it? The artist had basically changed it, or did most of the time your collaborators stick to what you had intended?
Did your collaborators stick to what you had intended? Did you ever have a story that was published was not what you had in mind?
I'm not sure I understand.
Did you ever have a case where you wrote a story, and by the time it came out, it was changed, it didn't come out the way you wanted it to?
It didn't happen. It didn't happen. My copy was never edited to any degree at all. There was a level of trust between Stan and Roy, and I don't know what Stan and Roy said about it. It's what I felt. In which, you know, unless you did something really crazy, you just weren't going to have that kind of quality. So your copy was not going to be heavily edited, and certainly mine never was. I would probably gotten angry if it did, because that's the kind of guy I was, an angry drunk. But I don't remember ever having that experience. So the answer to your question is no.
Another question? Yes, again.
Favorite points in Sergeant Fury?
Your favorite Sergeant Fury story? Favorite Sergeant Fury storyline?
Yeah, no, there were some. My favorites are all the stories that start with the word "the." I'll say, well, this feels like a "the."
There's a story you did called The War Lover.
Yeah, The War Lover, The Deserter, I don't know, there were several of them. And I said, this feels like a "the" month, and then I try to dream up something really special for that month, and I usually enjoy doing those stories. The Deserter was one of the good ones. I like that.
Dave?
I'm kind of curious, since 1976, the first attempt to crossover between Marvel and DC was Superman and Spider-Man. over the years, they tried with the Teen Titans and X-Men and Justice League and the Avengers. Do you like to see Sergeant Fury with Sergeant Rock?
Would you like to see someone do a comic one time where Sergeant Fury met Sergeant Rock from DC? Sergeant Fury and Sergeant Rock, the two companies crossing over.
What would I think of that?
Yeah, what do you think of that?
That wouldn't be anything that interested me. Characters from two different worlds, two different angles of writing comic books, and there's nothing wrong with it. It'd be fine. It wouldn't be anything that interested me. I wouldn't get excited about it.
Anyone, we got time for like one more question. Anybody else here? Yes, sir.
There was an issue of Sergeant Fury that was based on Casablanca.
Yeah, issue of Sergeant Fury based, the issue we did Casablanca.
And it got changed.
That has a way of coming up. I had this idea to write a story of Sergeant Fury that took place at the same time the movie Casablanca was taking place. They would be sort of intertwined. And I worked all of the major characters from the movie into the script. And the name of the story was Play It Again, Sam. It was a Happy Sam Sawyer story. And Sam was chasing Nazis around Casablanca while Rick and Elsa were doing their thing over in Rick's cafe. And it was a cute little story, and the artwork was, by the time Severin got through, was glorious. And Stan saw it and went absolutely berserk. One of the only two times Stan ever got mad at me. And Roy took the brunt of it because Roy was the editor, and Stan's attitude was that you should have known better than this. And I certainly knew better, and probably Roy knew better, but geez, we just wanted to do it so bad. Maybe we would just sneak it by the lawyers. And it never got to the lawyers. Stan stopped us right there and said, we can't do this. And they spent a day, I don't know where the hell I was. I must have been home drunk or something the day that it all came down, because they were running around the office like crazy, rewriting stuff, having pictures redrawn. They put a handlebar mustache on Humphrey Bogart and stuff like that. Anything they could do to change it, make it not like Casablanca, so the lawyers over at didn't get after them about it. It was crazy.
What was the other time Stan got mad at you? You said one or two times Stan got mad at you. What was the other one?
The other one I don't talk about. It was personal.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, did you enjoy this as much as I did? Yeah.
Let me just say this. I meant to do this before we did this, and I hadn't had a chance to. For a guy like you who's been out in the business for 30 years or so, to come back to these cons and see that there are people who really appreciate my work means so much to me. Thank you so much.
Seats, and then Sergio and Stan Sakara will come in. But they actually gave us too small a room for this. So if you stay here, you can get to see this panel with Stan Sakara and Sergio. And then if you stay after that, I'm going to do a panel with Roy Thomas here, where he will rebut every single thing. If you get a chance, go down to the dealers. And Gary's over at Artist Alley. Go talk to him there. He's got some lovely little pictures and prints and things like that you should take a look at. And thank you, Gary. I've interviewed this man about 4 times, and I always enjoy it. It's always I make conventions bring him out just so I can talk to him these times. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Mark.